Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today I'm going to be making some color swatches. I had a viewer request or ask if maybe I could make a video of exactly how I do my color swatches, kind of give some tips and tricks. So I thought I'd do that. The actual color swatches themselves are made out of 100% cotton fabric. I usually purchase my fabric at either Joann's fabric store or Hobby Lobby. I usually purchase about 3 or 4 yards at a time, and the first thing that I do is I wash it in my washing machine using hot water and some Dharma's professional textile detergent. After it's finished washing, I dry it, then I give it a quick iron to make it a little bit easier to cut into about 5-inch squares. I've been making color swatches for years, and I have not always made my color swatches the same size. So I do have some that are smaller, some that are a little bit larger. And then if you remember, during 2020, it was almost impossible to buy fabric. So I got a little bit desperate when I needed to make color swatches, and I found some bandanas that were white and cut those up and used those. The fabric on the bandanas was a little bit thinner, so they're not my favorite color swatches, but they worked in a pinch. I got in some Dharma's Zombie colors, which they released for 2023 Halloween season, and so I'm going to do my color swatches using those, and I have a couple other colors that for whatever reason I don't have swatches for. So I'm going to ice dye 6 swatches, and I'm going to liquid dye 4 swatches. I've already taken my color swatches and written the names of the dye colors in a Sharpie up in the corner. Then I've taken all of those swatches and I've placed them down inside of my soda ash solution bucket to allow them to soak. Since they aren't really thick, you don't necessarily need to soak them the 20 to 30 minutes that I normally do a regular shirt before I tie-dye it. You can just leave them in there for maybe 5 minutes, just long enough that they get well saturated. I'm going to start by doing the ice-dyed swatches. So I have a plastic tub or tote that I've put a rack down in the bottom of, and then to keep the swatch in place, I'm using one of my silicone cake molds that I'm just making into a circle, and I'm going to place the color swatch that's been soaked in a soda ash solution inside of that cake mold. I'm going to apply the dye over the top of the ice. So I'm going to place my color swatch down inside of the cake mold, and then ice on top and dye on top of that. But when I kind of crumple up my color swatch and place it down inside of the cake mold, I can't read the color anymore. And I'm not going to be able to read the color because I'm going to put ice on top. So if you notice over to the left, I have all my dyes lined up. And I have them lined up in the order that I'm placing the colors into my cake molds. That way, I know exactly which color is in which cake mold, and I can apply the proper color to the correct color swatch. As I'm crumpling up my color swatches, I'm not crumpling them up really tight because I want the dye to be able to move down through the fabric and for the color splits to show. Once I have all of my color swatches down inside of the cake molds, I'm going to go ahead and get some smaller pieces of ice to put over the top. I don't want to use too much ice because these are very small pieces of fabric. Now that the ice is on top of the swatches, I'm going to go ahead and apply the dye. It's a little bit difficult to tell you how much dye to apply because it can change based upon the colors. But you don't want to add too much dye because then you're not going to get as many dye splits because it's going to pretty much be a solid color. If you add too little dye, well then sometimes the dye splits don't show up because you don't have quite enough dye. So it's just kind of a feel thing. You'll get the hang of it once you do a few of these, and you'll kind of learn how much is too much. I just do a fairly light sprinkle over the top of the ice, but I do cover most of the top of the ice. Once I have all of the dye on top, I'm going to add a little bit of extra soda ash to the top of the dye. Just a very light sprinkle. I'm going to move this container aside a little bit so that I can do the liquid dyed swatches. I think one of the easiest ways to do liquid dyed swatches is down inside of small zippered bags. So I have some that are smaller than a quart size bag. I think they're maybe a snack size bag. And I take my soaked soda ash color swatches and place each one down inside of a different baggie. For these, I don't really crumple them or do any kind of design because I'm going to dye them a solid color. And it's a little bit easier to see the color through the baggie too, so it's not quite as critical that you have your dyes lined up. If you're doing a bunch of them, you can go ahead and do that if you'd like, and then place the baggies in front of your dye bottle. I already have some of the liquid dyed swatches for the colors that I did the ice dyed swatches for, so I'm only doing 4 liquid dyed swatches today. By the way, if you're doing some really dark colors, like black liquid dyed swatches or really dark grays, dark greens, navies, even reds, it may be very difficult to read your Sharpie once the dye swatch has been washed, dried, and everything done to it. So what I like to do is, if I'm doing several of the darker colors, I like to keep them separate, or I do them in batches so that I kind of keep track of which black I'm doing or which darker color I'm doing in each batch. If you do them all together, it becomes a guessing game as to which color is which. So once I have the dye swatches in their baggies, I'm going to grab a color, shake it up really well, and then I'm just going to take the lid off and squirt quite a bit down inside of the baggie. Once I have a pretty good portion of dye squirted down inside of the baggie, I'm going to zip it up and I'm going to take my hands and kind of massage that color into the dye swatch. I know I'm a little bit off camera right now when I'm doing this, but I think you kind of get the gist of what I'm doing. Then I'm going to place the baggie down inside of a container just in case this baggie leaks. I haven't really ever had that problem, but I don't want to take a chance. I'm going to do this with the other 3 remaining colors, and then I'm going to put both the ice dyed swatches and the liquid dyed swatches aside and allow them to process. If I'm mixing up liquid dye to use only for a dye swatch and not for a shirt, I usually try to mix no more than 1/4 cup of dye. I don't like to have a lot left over. Even mixing up a small amount, dye swatches take literally just a very tiny amount. So I usually do have some left over. Instead of wasting it, if the colors go together well, I'll do what I call a cleanup shirt, where I either do a spiral or some other design and try to use all the liquid dye on one shirt. Believe it or not, some of the coolest looking shirts are the cleanup shirts because they're colors that I wouldn't necessarily put together, but that odd color combination looks really eye-catching and makes them look really cool. Okay, I'm going to process these swatches the way I would a shirt. I'm going to wait for the ice to melt on the ice dyed ones, and then because the fabric is a really small piece of fabric and it's pretty thin, after the ice melts, I'm going to take the silicone cake molds away from around the edge of them and then put the lid on the container. My container isn't tall enough where I can leave the silicone cake molds around the swatches and the lid fit on top. I'm going to add the lid because I don't want the swatches to dry out until they've had plenty of time for the dye to bond with the fabric. I'm not going to have that problem with the liquid dyed swatches because they're inside of plastic bags. Then once the 24 hours is up, I'm going to go ahead and rinse them the way I would rinse a normal shirt. Starting in cold water to rinse out the soda ash, warming to hot, and then I'm going to wash them in my washing machine on a hot water cycle using some Dharma's textile detergent. Okay, so here are what the completed swatches look like. I think the zombie colors look really cool. At this point, if my Sharpie writing is kind of faint and I'm having a little bit of difficulty reading it, I can always take my Sharpie and do some touch-up. Or what I've done in the past is I take just a piece of plain white fabric, write the color on there, and pin it to my swatch, or use a white paint pen, which you can get at usually Hobby Lobby or Michael's, and write the color on the swatch that way. Like I said, the guessing game is not fun when it comes to color swatches. Sometimes that can lead to some disappointment when you do a project and you have your colors mislabeled. And if you have a color swatch that you can't read the color of at all, sometimes you can use a process of elimination to figure out which color that is. That's what I mean about if I have several colors that I know they're going to be really dark, I don't do those or process those all at the same time and rinse them out together. That way I can kind of backtrack to figure out what color the really dark one is that I can't read the color name on. Okay, so I hope I've explained how I do my color swatches and have maybe made it a little bit easier for you to make color swatches if you want to. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.